Hi, here we are to continue our discussion of the scroll view and the segmented controller. And here's the example that we have. You can see when I drag this scroll view, the segmented controller changes. Let me point something out. There's kind of a subtle thing that's going on here. As I drag the view, you can see it's showing the first view all the way, right? Watch. If I drag from the edge there, you can see it's the first view all the way until the second view gets all the way in there, right? Then it switches, right? Really, I feel it should be switching when we cross the halfway point. So about here, it should show the second view, or the second item on the segmented controller, the second segment, let's call it, right? So what's happening here is we're using int to round this number off. Like page is a number, right? Because it's w divided by the offset. And, that gives us a number, right? And when we're near the first page, it should be 0 to 1, right? And then when we get into the second page, it should be 1 or greater, right? But int is always going to round down. So what we need to do is we need to round this, like when we're further than the halfway point, then page will be 0.5 or greater, right? So maybe at that point we want to round up to 1 rather than down to 0, right? So I made a mistake earlier. Actually, the first page, the value here will be 0 to 1, right? So anyway, so how do we do that? Why don't we put round in here, and then let me get rid of that space there, right? And now what we'll do is we'll round, and I got to put an n in there. There we go, right? So we'll round the value of page off to the nearest whole number and then turn it into an int. So let's give it a try, right? This time, as I drag here, when I get past the halfway point, the segment changes, right? Or if I get to here, then it's going to snap, right? So, whichever direction it's going to snap to, the segment is the correct one, right? So anyway, so there's a small improvement there, right? And that works pretty good. Let's also add one other improvement. Up here, I'm, matching the selected segment index to a value and then multiplying times the width, right? Why don't we, the width here is actually 375, right? So this would move everybody 375 over. But what if the screen was a different size, right? If we're on an iPhone 4 or 5 or iPhone 6 Plus, the screen size is going to be different from the 375. So why don't we change this? I'm going to move this down here, and I'm going to delete this in a moment and add some simpler code here that will allow us to use any screen size and expand the number of pages very easily, right? So what we'll do is we'll just take this 375 number and multiply by the width of the screen. And you remember we calculated the width of the screen down here as ScrollView frame.size.width, right? So let's do this. Let's say, let x. So what we're doing is we're going to calculate the value for x here, right? Let's say let x equal ScrollView.frame.size.width and multiply times. And what I want to do is I want to multiply times the selected segment index. The thing about this index, though, is this is an int, right? And frame.width is, it doesn't say it here, but it's a CG float, right? So what we'll need to do is we'll need to cast that as a CG float, and now we can say segmented or sender dot selected segment index, cast u as a CG float, and then multiply times the width, and then we get x as a CG width or a CG float. And then what we'll do is we'll just call this thing right here, right? ScrollView.set content offset, right? And then we need to set this to a CG point, which happens to have the x property, which we'll set to x. And then it has a y property, which we'll just set to 0 because we're not scrolling vertically. And animated, true. Yeah, sure. That sounds pretty good, right? And then we can just actually delete all this. So that was actually a huge simplification of our code there, and it also makes our code more flexible. So let's give it a try, right? Let's see if I got the math right here. We'll test it there. Oh, nice, right? If I click on these guys, it works. Hey, let's give that another test, right? What if we want to add more pages? Now this, I don't have a better solution for this, right? You know, if you want to add another page here, we'll just have to make this view controller wider. I mean, you could probably do this another way, but this seems to be the easiest way to plan this out. I'm going to click on the view controller here and set the width to, what is it? It's another 375, so that'd be 1,050, 1125, right? So that's another 375 pixel wide section, and you know what I'll do is I'll grab this edge and snap it over here like that, and then maybe I need another, you know, some other picture or something in here or some other content for this section, right? Maybe I'll resize this and change the color like that. There we go. And then, you know, we'll need another matching segment, right? So I'll go to the segment here. It says segments 2. I'll change that to 3. And we'll, for some reason, in order to set the label, you got to double click like kind of up in the corner there, right? But we'll name that one 3rd. Okay, so let's give it a try. And there we go, right? So there's 2nd one, 3rd one. And then I can animate these guys by clicking on their segment, right? And that seems to work pretty good. And there you go. So hopefully that's helpful or, you know, informative, and maybe gives you some ideas or helps you out with your projects. Thanks for watching.